Hey everyone, I'm Fox with Foxio Games, and this is Dark Souls 2, available on the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and PC. For the purposes of this review, I'll be focusing primarily on the PC version, but I'll also cover the big issues that separate the PC and console versions. While I know this may not be the case, I'm going to assume that you're either familiar with Demon Souls and Dark Souls, or you've at least watched my reviews of those two games. There are links to each review in the description, as well as at the end of this video. Just be aware that I won't explain everything from the ground up. I'm assuming everyone watching has some basic knowledge of the Souls series. For longtime fans of my channel, let me address the elephant in the room. Yes, I have already reviewed Dark Souls 2. I uploaded an over 40-minute review video on my channel not long after the game released. So, what's this video about? Well, that original review is gone. It's no longer available. Why? Because the review really didn't accurately reflect how I feel about the game. Many of the statements I made in the review are either simply no longer true for me, or they're just very misleading. In some ways, my opinions have changed, but at the same time, I think I was delusional when I made that review. Looking back, I completely disagree with many of the things that I said. So with that said, let's start a fresh review of Dark Souls 2, beginning with the PC port, and then the technical aspects of both console versions. If you recall Dark Souls, or at least my review of it, there was no shortage of problems with the PC port. In fact, it was one of the worst functional PC ports in recent memory. I say functional because none of its issues prevented you from playing through the entire game. Unfortunately, the game looks and performs so poorly, I'm not entirely sure you'd want to play it. While it did look and play better than the console versions on a decent gaming PC, it wasn't by much. However, a user-made mod later resolved nearly all of those issues. And I'm happy to report that From Software learned its lesson with Dark Souls. Dark Souls 2 is a technical marvel compared to its predecessor. You can play the game at resolutions up to 4K and possibly higher, I have no idea, I can't even attempt it, and there are a decent number of graphics options to play with. The game plays at a very, incredibly smooth 60 frames per second. While it would be nice if the frame rate had no cap at all, 60 FPS is a massive improvement over the locked 30 in Dark Souls. And as for that 60 frames per second, there was virtually nothing I could do to get this game to drop frames. I even used downsampling, which is running the game at a resolution higher than my monitor's maximum resolution. Even running the game at max settings in 1440p resolution with NVIDIA's advanced anti-aliasing enabled, I virtually never saw anything less than 60 FPS. Now occasionally you might see 59 FPS, but that's a small variation in how the frame rate is measured and not a true drop in performance. When I originally played the game, I was running it on a GTX 970 with 4 gigs of video memory and an Intel Core i5. What you're seeing now is being run on a GTX 980 Ti with 6 gigs of video memory and an Intel Core i7. See the description for my exact specs. What you're seeing now is the unmodded game running on DirectX 9. Yes, as per usual, PC gamers love to mod the heck out of their games, custom tailoring the look to their own personal tastes. We'll get to the mods later, but just beware that future footage that you'll see in this review will likely have some mods on it, so it won't look like the vanilla version. In addition to the usual brightness setting, which is located in a different menu, you get the following graphics options. Full screen or windowed, resolutions up to 4K, and an option to auto-detect settings. On the second page are quality settings for textures, shadows, effects, water surfaces, character models, and models, which I guess is models other than character models. You can turn anti-aliasing, SSAO, depth of field, motion blur, and camera blur either on or off, and anisotropic filtering can be set from off to strong. With only a few exceptions, none of these options were present in the original Dark Souls. In fact, while there was a resolution option, it only affected the display resolution, not the rendering resolution. The game rendered at sub-HD. That was Dark Souls, not Dark Souls 2. So, Dark Souls 2 is a huge step forward for From Software when it comes to PC ports. There are quite a few options, and the performance, as we discussed, is absolutely nothing short of amazing. There are some other gameplay settings as well, such as camera control and sensitivity, as well as to allow worldwide multiplayer or restrict it to your region only. But of course, regardless of the fact that Dark Souls 2 is leagues better in the port department than the previous game, I still have to point out that as a standalone PC title, it falls short in the graphics department. Let's begin with the settings. While there are quite a few settings, many of them lack detailed choices. Anti-aliasing is simply on or off, no option to choose the type or level of AA. Depth of field and SSAO are also limited to simply on or off, lacking any additional detail and choice. Oh, and anisotropic filtering has vague wording instead of the more clear numbers. Seriously, I don't know what strong means for anisotropic filtering. Does that mean 16 times? Who knows? Not that I expected it, but the game also lacks a borderless windowed mode and does not natively support extra wide monitors. But you know what's conspicuously missing from the graphics options? It should be really obvious, but it's been a while and the controversy surrounding this particular thing has since died down. Here's a hint. It was a heavily emphasized feature of the visuals that got quietly removed before release. Alright, your final hint, and a dead giveaway. It works in conjunction with the torches in the game. Yes, of course, it's the lighting. There are no real lighting options here. There's a shadow quality setting, but nothing related to lighting. No bloom, no HDR, just shadows. And the shadows are okay, I guess, but the awesome lighting system they pushed on us endlessly before the game's release is nowhere to be found. It's not even present in the re-release of the game, which made use of DirectX 11 and ran on the Xbox One and PlayStation 4. I will not be addressing that re-release. We'll talk about lighting a little more later. As for the controls, well, I wish I could say they really stepped up their game here too, but they haven't. It's better than Dark Souls, don't get me wrong, but it's still bad. From Software clearly didn't bother consulting with a single actual PC gamer when they designed this control scheme. The mouse camera controls are smooth and adjustable this time around, but the key bindings? Oh my gosh, the key bindings. Oh, they're bad. I mean, just look at these mouse controls. By default, you attack with the right hand by right-clicking. Now, that's your standard attack, the one you're going to use the most often. It's equivalent to the PlayStation 3's R1 or the 360's right bumper, your standard attack, right? It's the one you use literally virtually all the time. Right-clicking for your main attack. That is so ridiculously stupid, I'm at a loss for words. And it gets even worse. To do a strong attack, which is the R2 or right trigger, you double-click the right mouse button. Double-click the right mouse button for a primary attack. Wow, I can't even, oh my gosh, what am I looking at here? What is this? The interact function is bound to shift left click. Using an item is shift right click. Oh my gosh. An item, shift right click. Now there is an interact button on the keyboard, but it's not the usual E key. It's the enter key, a key that you absolutely cannot reach from the WASD movement controls. I mean, they bound use item to shift right click or enter. If you're going to use mouse and keyboard, you have to change that. It's virtually unusable. Now, in their defense, you can remap it to another keyboard key, but why in the world would you ever, for any reason, think that a PC gamer would want to shift right click to use an item? Or how about control click mouse wheel to two-hand your weapon? How about that one? Switching your right weapon is control right click. Oh man, somebody help me. Okay, so basically, most of the default key bindings in this game are complete and utter nonsense. The menu is now bound to escape, which is far better than Dark Souls' end button, but to cancel or move back in menus is done with the backspace key. Yeah, the backspace key. Well, you know, I guess that kind of makes sense if you have no idea how PC gaming controls work. I mean, backspace has the word back in it, so I can kind of get their thought process there, but no, you don't make backspace the cancel button for menus. You just don't. To toggle the menu left, you hit shift plus left arrow key. I gotta stop. I can't keep doing it, I gotta stop. So what have we learned here today? Use a controller. And unfortunately, you have to use an Xbox 360 or Xbox One controller or use an X input emulator. So I've got one linked in the description just for you. And they also added an annoying dead zone to the analog sticks in Dark Souls 2 that wasn't present in the first game. There's a fix for that as well in the description. The graphics in Dark Souls 2 are not surprisingly a mixed bag. While many of the vistas and landscapes look pretty good from a design perspective, the details are a different story. A pretty cool art direction and aesthetic is just bogged down by bad textures, terrible lighting, and some texture popping. First, the textures. With few exceptions, they're terrible. They're not really low resolution, but for reasons I can't quite put my finger on, they look incredibly bland and boring. I'll take the textures in both Demon Souls and Dark Souls to these any day. I don't have much else to say about the textures, so on to the lighting. It's also bad. Not only was the much bragged about original lighting system wholly removed from the game, rendering the torch mechanic nearly useless, but the lighting in the game is absolutely nothing special. The entire game world feels like it's covered by a mostly translucent layer of white. This is probably more of a contrast issue than a lighting issue, but it just makes the entire game look and feel wrong in most areas. If you use a third-party solution like SweetFX or one of the E and B mods to adjust the lighting and contrast in the game, you will see a world of difference, and it really highlights just how bad the default visuals are. I was genuinely shocked that they released the game looking this bad, especially since the solution to this terrible contrast issue is so simple. It does kind of call into question the competency and the skill of the team working on this game. As for the texture popping, thankfully it's not very common. It's most noticeable when stepping into or out of a building or room, as some of the elements in the room will suddenly appear or disappear in a split second. When it does happen, it really breaks the immersion and hurts the overall feel of the game, especially considering that it is wholly unnecessary for the PC version. It's unquestionably a design decision intended to conserve processing power for the consoles, so again, I have to question the competency of the development team. Why would they leave this blatantly obvious texture pop-in issue in the PC version? Now, I don't want to be all negative, so I would like to reiterate that many elements of the art direction are pretty good. I wasn't blown away, but I genuinely liked the visual design in many areas of the game, even if those areas turned out to be smaller than they first appeared. The best example would be Hade's Tower of Flame, or Hyde's, or however you pronounce it, I don't know. It looks pretty cool when you first enter, but is disappointingly small and uninteresting once you start exploring it. As for the music in the game, well, this is where I really screwed up my original review. I lauded the music as the best soundtrack in the series, and to this day, I have no idea what I was thinking. Dark Souls 2's music is without question the least impressive of the series. Nearly all of the boss battle tracks are completely forgettable and generic, and could be interchanged for any other. None of them seem particularly tailored for the specific bosses you fight. However, I do want to say that I love the Majula theme. Something about it just feels right. It's fairly quiet and subdued, yet belies this certain melancholy and sense of despair. It is single-handedly the only redeeming quality to the soundtrack in this game for me. As for the sound effects and sound balance, it's okay. The background sound effects for the storm during one boss battle were ridiculously too loud due to an audio bug, but I think they've patched that out. As for the voice work, it's typical for the series, which is to say, it's very good. The voice actors clearly put some real effort into their lines, and whoever is guiding them on what to say and how to say it is also doing an amazing job. Undoubtedly one of the most unappreciated roles in game development. So, story. Well, how should I put this? It's a giant mess. There is talk of why the story got so jumbled up and who's responsible. I've heard mention of one of the directors having to take the lead halfway through and try to clean up and change direction, and I've also heard rumors that they just tried too hard to mimic Miyazaki and failed miserably. I think most Souls fans can tell the difference between a deep and meaningful story that leaves unanswered questions and an incomplete story that just doesn't fit together. Both leave questions, but the former does it in a good way, whereas the latter fails at accomplishing its goals, leaving a confusing, ambiguous mess in its place. I consider going over a lot of the details of why the story is bad, but I figured many others have done that far better than I could. Besides, this is a review of the game, not a commentary on the story's plot holes and issues. I've linked 2 videos in the description, but if you want to watch more, just search for them on YouTube. Plenty of people have laid out their case for why Dark Souls 2's story failed miserably. To address the big issues with the story would simultaneously spoil it, and I don't want to do that. I will mention that the NPCs in the game are terribly uninteresting for the most part, and few of them do anything significant for the entirety of the game. Once an NPC shows up in Majula, they typically don't do anything else but sell you stuff or just talk to you. There are many storylines that seem to have been just left unfinished. The replacement story arc for Patches, a guy named Pate, is about the best the game gets, and even that's not amazing. But what about the gameplay? How is it in Dark Souls 2? I found the gameplay in this game to be a giant mixed bag, with something bad for everything good. Starting with the basic controls, they're not very good. They feel loose and floaty, and you don't get that sense of tight control that you had in the previous games. Animations look smoother when you're moving, but your character doesn't always do what you want him to, or expect him to. When rolling and attacking, you'll often attack in a direction you didn't intend to. The lock-on is spotty at best, and you'll often attack beside your target, despite being locked on and standing right in front of them. When rolling away from your locked-on target, you turn your back to the target, exposing yourself for a backstab. Is it more realistic? Yes. Is it more fun? No. I mean, if we're going for realism, you would die after the first giant sword came crashing down on your head, so obviously realism isn't a goal here. Stamina depletes extremely fast even when running, and it regenerates way too slowly. When low on stamina, your attacks actually slow down, making the combat feel extremely sluggish and bogged down. You'll find yourself frantically hitting the roll button as your character sluggishly accomplishes an attack that feels ridiculously slow. The game has poise, but it just doesn't seem to work. I've had people explain it to me, but I don't care what anyone says, poise in this game is just plain broken. When the game first released, people in Havel's armor were being stun-locked by plain daggers. Oh, and the Agon was one of the most powerful weapons in the game, doing more damage than a two-handed R2 from a greatsword and tracking your opponent nearly 1-to-1. It was virtually impossible to dodge all 3 bolts from the Agon. The combat looks very similar to the previous games, except with some new mechanics. Dual wielding is now a far more viable option, with a special power stance just for that purpose. You can set the jump mechanic to the analog stick instead of the B button, but neither option is all that great in my opinion. Either way, jumps are really hard to control and easy to mess up. Durability is a much bigger issue this time around. Your weapons and armor automatically restore durability every time you rest at a bonfire, but if they're broken, they need to be repaired at a blacksmith. Durability drains quite quickly, particularly with some weapons, so you'll find yourself really needing the repairs from bonfires. More on that later. Now for hit detection. It's abysmal. Dark Souls 2 has unquestionably the worst hit detection I've seen in a recent title of this caliber. What I mean is, you would expect bad hit detection from some first-time indie title, or a game that's just obviously terrible, but Dark Souls 2 shouldn't be that way. Some of the enemies in this game will hit you with attacks that clearly, unquestionably didn't touch you, and I'm not talking about multiplayer combat here. These are computer-controlled enemies in your world. As for the multiplayer hit detection, holy crap guys, it's beyond abysmal. You will literally get hit by melee attacks from across the screen. It is torturous and one of the most frustrating and aggravating online experiences I've ever endured. And when you get hit, whether multiplayer or not, you have this awkward little floating animation where you just seem to glide across the ground. It just really hurts the game's feel. There are lots of issues with the gameplay, but let's get to the verdict. So, what is my final conclusion on Dark Souls 2? It's unworthy of the series title, and introduces a host of problems and changes that will frustrate players, particularly fans of the series. Let's hit on a bunch briefly. Vitality has always been your health stat, but not anymore. Dark Souls 2 changes Vitality to Vigor and makes Vitality equipment load, which is now separate from stamina. May I ask why? Why change the name? Wouldn't Vigor work just as well as the stat for equipment load? I mean, the answer is yes, it would. So why change Vitality to Vigor, then make Vitality do something different that the word Vigor could easily convey? I don't think there's any defense for that decision. It was just a terrible choice. Also, the stats improve your character in the weirdest ways and they don't make any sense. Vigor raises HP and Petrify resistance. That one's not too bad, but Adaptability raises all your resistances, your agility, poise, and increases your poison damage. Dexterity also improves your poison damage and your physical defense. Attunement gives you more slots for magic, but also raises your health, casting speed, and agility. What? It's clear that they couldn't balance the game properly, so they just threw a bunch of random bonuses on stats trying to get it to work. Want to increase your damage from bleed attacks? Raise your faith. Yeah, your faith for bleed. As for adaptability, I think this was a terrible decision. You've always had invincibility frames when you rolled in the Souls games, but now the number of frames of invincibility you have are decided by how high your agility is, which is primarily increased by adaptability. It also ever so slightly improves the speed at which you drink Estus. Yeah, I know, that's silly too. When you first start the game, dodging attacks with rolls feels totally off because you keep getting hit right in the middle of the roll. Why? Because you needed to level up adaptability for more agility to get more iframes. Feels like a total waste of your early levels, but if you don't do it, you're just gonna get hit, even when you dodge attacks. Linking your iframes to a stat was a bad idea. And speaking of bad ideas, why does this game have voice chat? Are you kidding me? Voice chat in a Souls game? No, turn it off. The developers seemed unable to figure out if they wanted to use the Estus system or if they wanted to go with a consumable healing item system, so I guess they just did both. And neither feels like it was properly balanced. You start the game by getting 1 Estus flask. Yeah, 1. Clearly you're meant to make use of the healing items, so you do. But you can buy an infinite supply of the lowest level healing item at a merchant early on in the game. With nearly everything else at the merchants limited, why is the healing consumable unlimited? Either use the Estus system or use a healing consumable system, but not both. Neither feels properly integrated into the game. The menus aren't bad, but why did they get rid of the ability to move stuff around to your liking? You used to be able to arrange items, and now you can't. Oh, and they failed to put in a necessary delay for moving through NPC dialogue and into merchant menus. If you mash the button to get through the same boring dialogue that you heard 100 times, which you will, you can easily end up accidentally going into the merchant store menu and buying something by mistake. I like the speedy menus, but you need a brief delay in there. This is especially problematic on the faster, smoother PC version of the game. Oh, and I forgot to get to the console versions of the game. Basically, they both run at 30 frames per second, like most of the time, but I think the Xbox 360 version sometimes goes beyond that, but not very often. The Xbox 360 version looks very similar to the PS3 version, and it seems to load a little faster in the menus than the PS3 does, having a little bit of lag, and sometimes the icons don't load all that quick on the PS3. But the Xbox 360 version just has terrible, terrible screen tearing, and I hate that. The game lets you warp from pretty much any bonfire to any other bonfire you've discovered, and this is available right from the start. I don't like it, and I don't think it was implemented very well. I think the developers used it as a mechanic to allow them to be lazy with their world design. Many areas are missing what should have been convenient shortcuts, no doubt the product of them relying on the bonfire warping system instead. And of course, you can't ignore the nonsensical geography of Drangleic, which looks like it was put together by a monkey. There's a bunch of recycled content from the first game, Dark Souls. I don't want to spoil anything, not that all of you haven't seen it already, but I couldn't help but feel that the attempts to harken back to the first game just felt ham-fisted and lazy. I thought it was poorly executed. Oh, and you can no longer level up at bonfires, but instead you have to use the Emerald Herald, who's similar to the Maiden in Black from Demon Souls. The reason this is not appropriate for Dark Souls 2 is because Demon Souls and Bloodborne don't use a bonfire system. The archstones and lamps in those games merely teleport you, therefore they don't serve any other purpose, making it necessary to give you another method for leveling up. Sitting at a bonfire in Dark Souls 2 allows you to do a variety of things, just like in Dark Souls, but for some reason they pulled leveling out of it and stuck it on this character who stays in Majula. To top it off, she has a bunch of lines of dialogue that she recites every single time you talk to her. You just end up mashing the button through the dialogue to get to the leveling, and it's something that should have been patched out long ago. You'll ultimately learn to resent her for her annoying dialogue. Speaking of annoying, some weapons in the game have a sweet spot for doing their maximum damage, particularly the halberds. In theory, this sounds cool. Hit with the axe blade end of the halberd, do more damage. Hit with the inner pole portion, do less damage. Realistic? Yes. Fun? No. In practice, it just makes some weapons harder to use effectively, and it's really annoying when you should be killing an enemy in 2 hits, but it takes 3 instead because you missed the sweet spot. It just makes some weapons less viable and more difficult to use. Oh, and here's a ridiculous little issue at the beginning of the game on the PC version. You're asked to name yourself. After typing in your name, it then asks you if you're sure of your name. Well, I was until you asked, and now I'm not so sure anymore. Whatever, that's not what I wanted to talk about. The issue is that after you finish typing your name and finally get to moving around, you'll notice something odd. If you hit any of the keys that activate unique PC postures in the game, they will now be active. You literally activated those functions while typing your name. For example, if your name contained the letter M, and only one M, you activated the always block function. So when you get control of your character, you'll always be blocking. It took me a while to figure out what was going on. I thought the game was glitching out. There are other keys too, like an always run option. If you don't know what's going on and how you activated it, this can be really confusing and frustrating. The game by default has cinematic effects for combat enabled. Again, just like voice chat, this is totally inappropriate for a Souls game. Never wrestle control of the camera away from the player during combat, and certainly don't do it for some silly cinematic effect to try to look cool. I hate the changes to the backstab and parry mechanics. Both are far less satisfying now, particularly the parries. You can say I'm bad at it, and heck, maybe I am, but I think the parry timings in this game are garbage. Even when I hit them spot on, they feel completely wrong. Remember how you had to predict when to parry in Dark Souls during PvP to account for network latency? Dark Souls 2 feels like that all the time, even when you're offline. If you do manage to get a parry, your opponent then goes into this awkward, silly looking animation where he falls on his butt on the ground and then just sits there on the ground, as if waiting for you to complete the predetermined action. You cannot immediately riposte your target. You literally have to wait for them to fall down first. It's lame. You know, the super tight, super responsive parry riposte of Demon Souls and Dark Souls are now a much looser, slower mechanic that just feels awkward and unsatisfying. As for the backstabs, they're better than the parries overall, but not by much. Instead of locking into a backstab right away, your character reaches out to try to grab your opponent. You will frequently miss and whiff your grab right through the air, which is incredibly frustrating. I found my character constantly attempting backstabs when I didn't even want him to. I was just trying to do a regular R1 attack. And of course, he would almost always miss on top of that. When you do get a backstab, once again, it's this long, silly looking animation for most weapons. Many weapons have you slash the opponent multiple times, looking like some finishing move from Mortal Kombat. Just looks dumb and feels dumb. As for the durability mechanic this time around, I can't stress enough how much I hate it. I don't really like durability mechanics in RPGs as a whole, but in Dark Souls 2, they went way overboard with it. You will frequently find weapons running low on durability before you can reach the next bonfire, and more than a few times my weapon straight up broke just while I was trying to get through the level. Many weapons have way too little durability to get from one bonfire to the next, or from the bonfire to the end of the boss battle. It'll break before that. And to really add insult to injury, repair powder is a pain in the butt to get a hold of, particularly early on. Your earlier merchants have limited quantities and you rarely ever find it. Speaking of limited quantities, what were they thinking? Nearly everything that can be bought in the game has a limited supply from each merchant. You want to buy more Titanite shards to upgrade another weapon because the first weapon you chose isn't working out? Too bad, the merchant's out and won't be getting any more anytime soon. Yeah, you can buy unlimited quantities of many of the lower level upgrade materials at the end of the game, but that's the end of the game. It's too late. You needed those towards the beginning of the game. To make matters worse, the game is extremely stingy with upgrade materials. Once you buy up all the Titanite shards, good luck finding more, either the base shards or the large version. You can explore every nook and cranny and still not find enough to reach the current max upgrade for that material. And like I said, I hope you don't change your mind and want to switch weapons. Remember the durability issue? Well, since you can't find enough upgrade materials, you can't even upgrade a second weapon to have on hand in case the first one breaks. They really back you into a corner in this game. And speaking of being backed into a corner, what's with all the ambush encounters? Has anyone actually counted how many times the game throws a boatload of enemies at you all at once? Is it hard? Heck yeah, it's hard. The lock-on is designed for one enemy, not 6. You get ambushed. All bets are off. You gotta think fast and pray for mercy because no matter how good you are, there's no way to control for that many enemies coming at you all at once and all of the possible combinations of how the battle could go wrong. If things start going bad, you're dead. You gotta try again. And remember, poise is pretty much broken, so you usually get staggered by just about everything that hits you. Oh, and when large enemies hit you with a powerful bash attack, it literally sends you flying. Your character faces the camera and hurtles towards it like he's a cartoon character in an episode of Looney Tunes. It looks ridiculous. Guys, I have so many other complaints about the game, but when it's all said and done, I try to take a step back and look at the big picture of Dark Souls 2. After looking at it and pondering on it for a while, all this time later, I just have to ask, what happened? How did it all go so wrong? We may never know the whole story of why Dark Souls 2 turned out to be such a big, confusing, clunky, ambiguous mess of a game, but I can say one thing for sure, it's a stain on the series and does damage to the Souls name. Every time I push through the game, it just feels like a drag. As one well-known Souls uploader put it, it's a chore to play. Fans of the series will feel compelled to play it obviously, but for everyone else, I recommend passing on this one. It's just not worth the frustration. But, as always, I would love to hear your opinions and thoughts, so type them up in the comments section below. Don't forget to give the video a like or a dislike based on your preferences, subscribe if you haven't already, and check the video description for links to my Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, Let's Play channel, and all that other good stuff. I'm Fox with Foxio Games, and I'll see you next time.